You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. This week, my guest is two-time World Lacrosse Champion and entrepreneur Paul Rabil. Paul is widely considered one of the greatest lacrosse players of all time, and the New York Times called him the Lebron James of lacrosse. Paul is the all-time scoring leader in professional lacrosse history and has won championships and MVP awards at the college, professional, and international level. Off the field, Paul is known for his remarkable work as an entrepreneur and his grassroots efforts to grow the game of lacrosse globally. He was named a top 40 most entrepreneurial athlete by Entrepreneur magazine, alongside sports legends like Tom Brady, Alex Morgan, Serena Williams, LeBron James, and many more. And in 2018, while still an active player, Paul co-founded the Premier Lacrosse League with his brother Mike. Now entering its sixth season, the Premier Lacrosse League continues to grow rapidly, expand viewership, and attract the world's top lacrosse talent. Paul is on a mission to inspire others with his story and is the author of the new book, The Way of the Champion: Pain, Persistence, and the Path Forward. We recently sat down to explore his journey, and Paul shared his blueprint for taking action on ambitious goals, overcoming setbacks, innovating new ideas, and so much more. I learned a ton from Paul, and I hope you take away as much from this conversation as I have. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Paul Rabil. Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, Paul.
Great to be here, man, and looking forward to this conversation. Love your podcast.
Paul, I am excited to dig into your entire story and everything that you're doing in the book. But where I want to begin, I want to go way back. At 12 years old, you got your first lacrosse stick from a next door neighbor named Bruce. And I'm always fascinated to ask people who have a moment that kind of sparks this incredible journey thereafter, what they remember most about that moment. So take me back, paint the scene. What do you remember most about Bruce handing you that lacrosse stick for the first time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was 12 years old, largely insecure, and wanted to be cool with my friend group. And Bruce was the cool guy in the neighborhood, good buddy of mine, was playing lacrosse, offered me his backup equipment to play, and I wanted to be cool. So I started playing. At the time, I was more of a basketball, soccer guy. That's where I was excelling and doing well. And I knew I was an athletic, kind of bigger kid. But I played lacrosse to be closer with my friends. And because of its technical elements as a stickball sport, it's difficult to pick up. It's like you don't step in an ice hockey rink and figure out how to slap shot a puck. It just takes some time. However, because it took time, my first game I played as a 12-year-old, I had this awful turnover. First time the ball was in my stick, I was winding up to take a shot, went the other direction. The ball flew backwards. And my defender picked it up, went down and scored. They ended up winning the game 3-2 because you didn't score that much at that age playing rec sports. And I remember going home that day and telling my parents I wanted to quit. So there's a lesson in the story of beginning lacrosse for me, which was around commitment. And my mom specifically was like, no, we are committing and we're fulfilling your commitment to this program for this season in the spring, and then we'll reevaluate it. But there are no quitters in this household. And so she would drive me to practice, drop me off, wait, take me home. A wonderful lesson and the best mom. And through that commitment, I started picking up the skill. I learned how to catch it there. I learned how to throw the ball forward versus backwards. And then, like anything in life, the better we get at it, the more passionate we become about it, and the more we can pursue a life in it.
Was that idea of commitment and at least seeing something through for one season, if you commit to it, was that the standard in your household? Like, did you know that going in, that if you started this, you were going to at least have to do this for a year or a season?
Yeah, it was the standard. And the standard was always lead by example. My dad sold paper for 35 years. My mom was an art teacher for just as many for an elementary school in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And the way that they raised us was largely around integrity and commitment, discipline, work ethic. But again, as a 12-year-old, your prefrontal cortex hasn't even begun developing, and you think you can skip over certain rules or be an exception. So I thought I was going to be the exception to the household rule, but my mom made sure to remind me every day that I was not. And had it not been for my mom, I most certainly wouldn't be sitting here for you right now.
Paul, I'm curious. Obviously, there was a lot to learn, lots of technical skills to develop. Let's break it down into kind of two things. The passion for lacrosse. I'm curious when you felt that spark, and then also when you also felt the ability spark, where you felt like your abilities were head and shoulders above other people. So talk about both.
Different stages, because sport has a reoccurring lesson. At each level that we advance to, we start over. Right. So as I developed skill enough on my middle school team, I became one of the best players. And then I went to high school as a freshman and I was the worst. And then I went to college. I became, I was one of the top recruits in the country, became a freshman again, was one of the worst. Same thing in the pros. So it's an amazing lesson of humility and persistence. I think there were two tipping points from a skill and an overall athletic sort of composition. The skill was in 8th grade. So it took me about 2 years to develop enough of it to where I could put the ball in the net consistently. And I don't think that our passion is something out there we need to go on a scavenger hunt looking for. It's actually within us. And we locate whatever it is. It could be more than one thing that we're really good at. And when we identify that and we nurture it, we become passionate about it. My goals when I was 10 years old, not even knowing what lacrosse was not to be a professional lacrosse player. I acclimated to the game quicker than I did basketball, soccer, or other sports that I love playing. So I realized that, man, this is something that I'm pretty good at and love when the ball started hitting the back of the net. And then I think by the time I was a junior in high school, I started really catching up to the athleticism that my body was capable of. And I started intellectually engaging in nurturing that athleticism. And in sports, if you have skill and athleticism, that's when you can take it to the next tier. Junior year in high school, I realized there was something there. In my collegiate 4-year stretch, I learned from one of the great coaches in Dave Petramala, who instilled a level of fierce competitive nature that I still use today and is largely where I cultivate my confidence and also deploy it in areas like I would have never thought I was going to write a book. I would never think that I would produce a film. I would never think that I could start a professional sports league with my brother. These are way outside the plate. But if you have enough passion, enough work ethic, and confidence and belief, I do believe we can manifest anything.
What was it about that coach in particular that you feel like he was able to connect with you in a way that enabled you to break down some of those walls and barriers that you might have self-created for yourself?
I would say Coach Petro had the most discipline, the greatest work ethic, competitive fire, and most importantly, the ability to sacrifice to achieve his goals. Those 4 things he displayed every single day. And I was really attracted to those attributes. Sacrifice, I think, most importantly, is Coach Petro outworked every other coach in the field, and that required him to let go of a lot of other things in his life. And he knew that he wouldn't be going out to Thursday dinners with friends or hanging out on the weekends or taking his summers off because of the recruiting ramp up. He just put everything into his craft. Now, as I got older, I learned how to reconcile with that and revisit it and build perspective and, kind of like break down what my identity had become, which was lacrosse. But certainly had I not had Coach Petra in my life, I wouldn't have achieved what I did at the pro ranks.
Is Coach Petra the same coach who instilled the lesson about 100 shots per day? Or
he didn't, but he's in the same bloodline. So I ended up going to Johns Hopkins. That coach was a former Johns Hopkins coach, Tony Seaman, who ended up coaching in the pros, is a Hall of Famer. And he was at a camp that I went to in 8th grade. So right at that point where you asked about my confidence and passion for the game, started putting the ball in the back of the net so I could start speaking the language more. He pulled us aside at a lacrosse camp in the summer and asked who here wants to be the best, who here wants to play in college, who here wants to get a full scholarship to play at a college of your choice, all things that were music to my ears. And everyone in the room raised their hand, but I think that that's not the uncommon part. The uncommon part is who's willing to commit to what the promise is. And Coach Seaman said, if you shoot 100 shots a day from this day through your senior year in high school, I guarantee those 3 things will become a reality for you. I guarantee it. He said the only caveat is that you cannot miss a day, not one day. Not for a holiday, not for a vacation, not because it's raining, not because you had the game. You had a game day or you just finished a game day. You're preparing, you're sick, you're injured. You have to find a way. That resonated for me. And that was the difference. You know, we're always looking for a competitive edge. One day is a difference, especially over a 5, 10, 20, 30-year career.
what's the, like, when you think back, like, what's like the wildest place that you kind of like organized yourself to get in 100 shots over the course of that, whatever it was, the next 10, 15 year period for you?
I mean, I made goals up. I would shoot on chairs. I would shoot against fences and tennis courts. At one point, I would take newspaper, ball it up like I used to see, you know, your high school peers do ahead of homecoming, where they write things into the fences with balled up newspaper, and I would design 6x6 net. It wouldn't last long because you shoot the ball hard enough, the newspaper pops out. But it was visually, you know, I played on handball courts, I played on beaches, I played against baseball backstops, all that type of stuff. I didn't have consistent access to a lacrosse goal, which tapped into some of my creativity that I've learned to harness over time.
It's funny. Like, I think of myself as this like very habitual person. Like, I'm driven by routines. And if I work out for 3 days in a row, there's a really strong likelihood that I'm going to work out again on the fourth day. But if I fall off and kind of break the chain, it's very hard to get back. Did it feel at some point relatively early on, maybe, that it started just become automatic? If I'm going somewhere, I'm going to figure out how to get 100 shots on.
Yeah, it's the beauty of habit creation. And there's no biometric data or proven evidence how long habit takes to form. There's been 30, 60, 90-day studies. But if you're at it for months and quarters and years, the thing that happened to me was I developed a second conscience for putting the work in. The first conscience, primary conscience for me, is around being a good person and the soft skills that we've talked about so far. This secondary conscience lived in my gut, and it was hovering over me every day like your alarm clock does in the morning. And if I wasn't out on the field shooting or doing something active, I couldn't go to bed. I couldn't rest. And that development for me goes beyond habit. That's a level of psychological commitment and a way of living.
Paul, speaking of being resourceful, and you outlined some of the things that were incredibly creative and resourceful that you did over the years to keep that chain rolling. Something that is obviously just remarkably resourceful and hard for probably many to get their minds around is essentially playing a sport, achieving a tremendous level of aptitude of a sport, reaching the pinnacle of your sport, and then saying, wait a minute, I'm going to create my own league to kind of transform the sport and change the way we do things. That's like the pinnacle of resourcefulness. So you did it in 2018 with your brother. You founded the Premier Lacrosse League. Now, I am curious, when you think back to back then versus where you are now, and there's been extraordinary growth and you're continuing to have extraordinary growth. What in the business plan back then has kind of held true, and what areas have kind of been different positively or negatively than you had anticipated? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, well, for those that aren't familiar with pro lacrosse, I had played for 10 years in a league called Major League Lacrosse, and my rookie wage was $6,000. When I became a champion and MVP of that league, my max ticked up to $16,000 for the season. So at this time, with new media and new technology, you saw the emergence of new sports leagues competitively with the big four in the US. So MLS, F1, UFC. And in 2001, when MLL first started, they were just as big and powerful in number of teams and business model as MLS, as UFC was. And so I'm sitting there as now an entrepreneur by necessity, because I had to figure out other ways to generate income such that I could pursue playing professionally full time, and saying, I wonder why pro lacrosse is not keeping up. Surely it isn't because this is a new sport. We're not changing circuit training and calling it CrossFit. We're not building slam ball. Both entities that have done quite well internationally and domestically. This is a game that is native to North America. It's been played for thousands of years. It's played at the university level since the 1800s. It was an Olympic sport in 1904, 1908. Cut to now, we've since gotten back into the Olympics.
Yep. Thanks in large part to you, Paul.
Product market fit is what this game had. So what's going on? How have we not figured this out? So there was the inquisitive approach. And because I had learned the sponsorship business and the media business via Meta and YouTube, Google, et cetera, and sponsorship through my first partners, and really digging into how sponsorships are formed and activated and delivered and returned, I saw some pretty glaring missed opportunities. So first, Mike and I went to MLL and said, hey, we'd like to help fix this. And of course, they looked at us as, a player and his brother, getting above their skis. So that led us to think more critically. And we decided to launch a competitive business. And we brought all the best players in the world over with us in 2018 when we announced, and our first season was in 2019 on June 1st. And what worked was the belief that the history of the game was indicative of where the future could be. New technology, new media could get us there faster than even when the UFC and MLS started. It took them 28 years to get to where they are today, but they were building in a linear era. So like television was to the NFL in the 60s, or radio was to baseball in the early 1900s, we wanted social media to be to pro lacrosse. All that stuff worked. That said, challenges are daily. Building a league from scratch takes so much work and commitment and sacrifice. It never gets easier. And that's the thing about the pursuit that we're all on. Timing is never really going to work out as planned. Things happen when you least expect it, when you need it the least.
You had a pandemic in the middle of this, the rise of the new league.
Yeah. Look, we wouldn't have been able to raise the capital from the investors that we had in 2018 had we all known there was going to be a global pandemic in 2020. But looking at those off-time moments in our careers, those are the opportunities as well. And so our network partner at that time was NBC, and the Olympics had just pushed, and they had dedicated all this linear inventory to Olympic programming. And we raised our hand and said, hey, if we figure out a bubble solution and a safe way to play, can we get those linear windows? So we went from like 4 games on television to 20 in the matter of one season to the second. That helped propel awareness while everyone was sitting at home trying to watch live sports. So those are the moments, right? As athletes, when we lose or we don't perform in the biggest of games, we have that opportunity to respond. And by the way, when you feel that sense of humiliation, having lost a championship game, one way to reframe it is you're the only one in the sport that has that level of fuel to return, to respond, to answer, that's really powerful if you realize it.
I know you have, like, you're incredibly curious and passionate about learning, just like I am, Paul, and you are constantly having conversations with people from all different disciplines, sports, business, entertainment, media, wherever, just as I am. And one of the through lines through all the conversations that I have is this idea that people who achieve a high level of success in anything have this knack for turning adversity and setbacks into eventual progress. And that has been something that I think you can look at adversity, you could look at a setback as a problem, or you can look at it as an opportunity. And what you described there was looking at it as an opportunity.
Totally. Yeah, I liken it to goal setting and where we mostly get it wrong, which is we set big goals around exciting accomplishments, winning a championship, being MVP, all pro, all star, scoring 6 points a game, going undefeated. And guess what? Most of the time, none of that happens. A lot of the time, only some of it happens. Very rarely does all of it happen. And when we're so reliant on really high mark goals and we come out of the gates slow, for example, maybe don't score a point in the first half, we have a tendency to downward spiral. The sport that gets it right is golf. They celebrate an up and down, which is basically saving par. Phil Mickelson's the second highest grossing golfer of all time behind Tiger Woods, and celebrated for being able to do a loft shot, chipping it out of the gravel, barely out of bounds, over a tall tree onto the green, and he taps in par. And that's celebrated. What is forgotten is the tee shot that he hit that put the ball almost out of bounds in the gravel behind a tree. And they've done a great job as a sport of saying, how are you going to respond? And if you respond, we're going to celebrate the hell out of you. So what is your rebound goal? What is your up and down in your sport, in your business, in your life? If you can unlock that, you're going to be really, really good.
Paul, what about the dynamics of, for the first few years, you create the league and you're playing in the league, and in many ways, the league's biggest star. Then you pivot to not playing in the league, and you're the president of the league. When you went through that shift, do you distinctly remember that there were things that you were able to draw from one vantage point and bring it to the other? And maybe during your playing days, were there things you could flip the other way too?
Yeah. I mean, if you ask many CEOs of Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, they like to recruit student athletes because of the experience and work ethic, teamwork, having a singular goal that you work through over a long period of time. Especially if an athlete excels in the classroom, they're a star candidate. Now, what I learned launching a league and was playing in it is that there were some really valuable skills that I pulled from the boardroom into my final seasons playing on the field. And the biggest difference I find between sport and in life is in sport, it's win, outwork the competition, whatever it takes to get there. It's binary. You're winning, someone's losing. In life and in business, it's about compromise and achieving the best outcome for everyone involved. If you're cutting a partnership deal, which in negotiation, we all get competitive and we want the best outcome of the deal. Well, if you get the best outcome of a deal, that means someone got a lesser outcome. And it's unlikely that that partnership will renew. And in business, we like to say we're in the renewal business, where we want to hold on to long-term partners and we want to build with them. So that was a big difference. Learning how to compromise enabled me to become a better teammate and a better leader and be more empathic and thereby help the team do better. So that was one. And then the other is having perspective, like building a venture-backed company, sorting through all of the nuances of relationships and challenges. Sometimes in sports, we get too tunnel vision focused, and there's upside in the pursuit of growth, but there's also downside when things inevitably don't go your way and you experience a lot of pain. It's good to widen your aperture. And I learned that in business.
Is there something you physically or mentally do, like for folks listening, when they get to a point where they would benefit from widening their aperture, is there something that you do to trigger that or move yourself to that zoom out phase?
Yeah, well, it's called self-regulation. And you can learn in therapy, you can learn through podcasts and books, different tactics, figuring out what works for you. You can meditate, you can take deep breaths and exhale, which has a biological impact on self-regulation and helping you get back to center. There's a chapter in my book where Kobe Bryant talks about getting over himself. And he would do two things after losing, and he lost a lot, like all of the greats. He would first remind himself that nobody really cares in the end. We're each thinking the same thing, that everyone else cares about us, which means we don't really care when Kobe Bryant shoots an air ball at the end of the game. Like, it's going to be fine. So it's a lowering of the temperature. And then number two, he goes, okay, how can I improve so I don't shoot another air ball at the end of the conference finals my rookie year for the Los Angeles Lakers? And so you start working on your conditioning. You understand that as a basketball player, when you shoot an air ball, you probably didn't even have your legs in your shot. So why didn't he have his legs in the fourth quarter? So things like that. So he deploys two tactics. What I would say is the last piece is understanding that the critical inner voice that we have, which is often telling us we suck, we're too old, we're not smart enough, we're not good looking, we're never going to find a romantic partner, whatever it is. You can turn that dial down, but it's never going to go away. It's a part of our DNA. Our ancestors were on this planet first to survive and hunt and start families. And it was really hard to survive 30,000 years ago. And so that runs in our makeup today. What people often think about, though, is when that critical inner voice gets really loud, the outlook is bleak. But we forget that whole notion of prove people wrong, when they tell you can't play pro, when they tell you can't win, when they tell you suck, and we end up winning, we make it pro, they tell us how great we are. That's because we've harnessed that same critical inner voice to our advantage. So I would say, understand that you have to build a relationship with it. It ain't going anywhere. You can turn the volume down and then figure out how to talk back to it.
That is powerful advice, Paul. Very, very well said. As we talk here, I have never played lacrosse, but one thing that I know you and I have in common is the curiosity and the thirst for learning. And like I alluded to earlier, on your podcast, you've had conversations with some of the world's top performers. I have had on this podcast now nearly 200 conversations with Olympians and TV stars and Grammy winners. And your new book, The Way of the Champion, Pain, Persistence, and the Path Forward, in it, you share insights and lessons that you've learned from elite athletes, coaches, entertainers, and entrepreneurs, and you call it a guide to greatness. And I'm just so curious, Paul, like when you think about it, where do you think that curiosity really comes from for you?
I think we all have it. And it's about unlocking it first, nurturing it, and growing it. We could talk about our family history and the different upbringings that we've had. And like I said earlier, I was an entrepreneur by necessity, by virtue of my wage. So it comes in different ways. But I think we all have it. And once you realize that and you figure out how to unlock it, it's endless. The pursuit of learning ran parallel with my pursuit of improving. They're one and the same. It's more linear as an athlete. You train to get faster, you train to get stronger, you train to acquire more skill. In life and intellectually, the range is so far and wide. And really, I believe one of our places here on earth is to learn, to relate, to improve. So I think about that quite a bit. And by the way, like there's a chapter in my book called Ask for Help. And it references how Howard Schultz, who was Starbucks' CEO and helped grow that company globally, said the most powerful, most important characteristic of any leader in any organization is the ability to ask for help. Now, why he says that is when you're a leader or when you're an athlete and you ask for help, the signal that we fear we're sending is that we don't know the answer. Therefore, we're potentially unprepared or not ready to play in the big game. And that's why a lot of people don't ask for help. But when you do, especially from the right person who knows the answer, you're going to get the answer really fast. You're going to put yourself in a position to win the game or acquire that new skill. And you're always going to end up with the best outcome. Underneath all of it, you're going to build a closer relationship with that person because we're showing vulnerability and the courage to say, hey, can you help me? So that's a story that I like to link to your question, which is why I'm so curious and what does unlock mean? Unlocking curiosity through courage, through vulnerability, through the willingness to say, hey, I need help. I want to learn. Those are all things that have to take place first.
I think so many people, Paul, view asking questions or asking for help as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I mean, I certainly subscribe to the mindset that asking questions and asking for help is like really like one of the ultimate signs of strength. And I think one of the most powerful things people can do is ask a good question and just start listening and soaking it in. And then asking a follow-up question and a follow-up question. And you obviously believe that as well.
Yeah. I mean, to finish that chapter out, I talk about Magic Johnson. You know, what does Magic Johnson and Howard Schultz have in common? Well, Magic Johnson made $40 million in his all-pro Hall of Fame playing career on the court. He's now a billionaire. Most of his money has been acquired after his playing days as a hooper. But when he was playing under the Buss family in LA and they were the first to roll out courtside seats, Magic thought to himself, these people are doing something interesting to be able to afford these expensive seats and come to games and wear these nice suits. So I'm going to reach out to our PR comms manager for the Lakers and see if I can get their information. He did. Then he gave them calls and asked them if he could take them out to lunch. Magic wanted to learn. Magic met Howard Schultz at a lunch and learned about Starbucks and became the first and only individual who owned a slew of Starbucks chains. He owned 126, I think, at one point. Made a ton of money together. And so why do I share that? Well, if you're someone like Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, Michael Phelps or Serena Williams or Tiger Woods, who changed his swing when he was already the best player in the world, their ability to continue to improve via curiosity and asking for help has helped propel them to a level that no one else has been. And then if you're conscious enough throughout the process, you end up discovering that there's no such thing as coincidence. We're all connected, just like that Howard Schultz belief with Magic Johnson.
The Magic Johnson story that you tell reminds me in many ways of, and you may have to fill in some of the gaps for me here, but I'm going based on memory. I believe the first episode of your podcast is a conversation you had with Bill Belichick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And in it, you tell a story of how you first met Bill. I believe he came to where you were playing college lacrosse, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Johns Hopkins.
And he was a friend of the coach. And that's how he ended up there. And you asked your coach if he could essentially broker an introduction between you and Bill Belichick because you wanted to learn from him. And I have to believe that there were a lot of people on the earth at that point that would be interested to meet Bill Belichick. But you had the courage to ask, and you had the courage to make it happen. And it's led to what's obviously been a fruitful friendship and relationship for both of you. So I actually see a lot of parallels between what Magic did and what you did in many ways.
Yeah, the humility piece is important to understand there's so much that we don't know. And so when I was able to land that meeting with Coach Belichick, I had the preparation and the humility to go, okay, I've got 20 questions I'm going to ask him. I'm going to use my time wisely. The confidence to ask the question, though, I've learned over time is more rare than I thought. I was taught growing up to just go for it. I still do to this day. And I ask myself often, what's the worst thing that can happen? And it's usually just that critical inner voice, rejection, they don't want to meet you. And as you build more awareness and perspective therapeutically with experience in life, you also stop taking things so damn personally. Coach Belichick is the greatest coach of all time and is a busy guy. And if he didn't have time after practice, it's not because he hates me or doesn't like me. He just didn't have time. That also is an unlock and helps me at least approach things with confidence and courage.
Paul, as we wrap up our conversation here, I kind of want to bring it full circle, I think, now that I think about it. I mean, in many ways, you have become the Bruce. You have become the literal and figurative person who's putting lacrosse sticks into people's hands certainly all over the United States and all over the world as well. Have you taken a moment to reflect on that and this incredible responsibility in many ways that you have to impact people's lives through a sport?
Yeah, I try to take time to sit down and reflect. The composition of this book came through dozens of notebooks that I keep. My process is consume information, watch it, hear it, write it down as step 2, and then share it with someone else. That could be the mirror in your bedroom. It could be your brother, your best friend, your parents, your teammates, your coach. To me, if I completed all 3 steps, it would lock something I've learned from short-term to long-term memory. I figured that out in college. And part of that note-taking journey for me is what I share in the book. But I've also learned that journaling is an intentional process that allows you to reflect and appreciate and have gratitude. It's something that my sports psychologist really worked with me on, is celebrating the wins. I grew up sort of thinking like MJ and Bird, whose vessel of motivation was their hatred for losing, their fear of losing. And it becomes so reactive that even when you win, your response is, all right, tomorrow we're back to work. I remember winning the national championship my freshman year with Coach Petro, and the next day he was on the road recruiting. And that can wear at you over time. So you've got to have the maintenance of that work ethic while also being able to sit back on major accomplishments and say, damn, this was really good. And I've got to appreciate this. It's going to add to the longevity of my career.
Well, Paul, I'll tell you something that was really good. This conversation and all the wisdom that you shared, I know I'm going to be thinking about it for a very, very long time to come. As I like to say on this podcast, you are a certified tarp puller. You lead by example. You're willing to do the work that other people aren't willing to do. And as a result, you lift others up. You've lifted an entire sport up, communities up. And I hope this is the first of many conversations, Paul. And I know I've learned a ton. For those listening, if you haven't picked up the book, I highly recommend it. Again, here it is, The Way of the Champion, Pain, Persistence, and the Path Forward by Paul Rabil. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this week, Paul.
Thank you for having me, brother. I really enjoyed it.
All right, everyone. If you loved this episode, you might also enjoy my interview with 2-time World Cup champion, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, and back-to-back FIFA Women's Player of the Year, Carly Lloyd. In 2003, Carly was cut from the U.S. under-21 national team. But instead of quitting, she got to work. She set out training 2 to 3 times per day and transformed her mindset to embrace challenges, stop making excuses, and turn weakness into strength. Ultimately, Carly went on to become the best player in the world, winning back-to-back FIFA Women's Player of the Year awards in 2015 and 2016. You can find my conversation with Carly right here on Everybody Pulls the Tarp in your favorite podcast app. It's filled with inspiration and powerful lessons that you don't want to miss. Check it out and let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.